Hello, friends. This is Kirk Magleby, Vice President of Operations with Ancient America Foundation, coming to you from the CA and Emma Savage Family Studio in Springville, Utah. I once called Dallin Oaks on the phone and asked if I and a bunch of my friends could come visit. He invited us over. This is the story of that delightful evening, with a bonus at the end. It was the fall of 1971. Ernest L. Wilkinson's 20-year tenure as president of BYU was over. The new president of the university was a 39-year-old legal scholar from the University of Chicago, Dallin H. Oaks. He and his wife June and their 5 children, Sharman, Sherry, Lloyd, Dallin D., and Truann, lived in the president's home near the Mazer building. It would be 4 more years before Jenny, the youngest, joined the family. I graduated from American Fork High School in 1971 and was a freshman at the Y. I was one of 15 recipients of the Joseph Fielding Smith Scholarship, the top award the university granted in that era. BYU's presidential scholarship began with David O. McKay. My cousin, Clayton Magleby Christensen, was a David O. McKay scholar when he began at the Y in the fall of 1970. It was customary for presidential scholars to travel to Salt Lake City and have an audience with the president of the church. Since David O. McKay died in January 1970, Clayton and the other 1970 McKay scholars actually visited with the new prophet, President Joseph Fielding Smith. By the fall of 1971, though, Joseph Fielding Smith was in very poor health. He died July 2nd, 1972, at the age of 95 years and 11 months. So the 15 of us Smith scholars were disappointed. A visit with the prophet was supposed to be one of the highlights of our freshman year. As a kind of consolation prize, I decided to arrange a visit with the president of the university. Now, back in those days, we had landlines and phone books. I simply looked up Dallin Oaks in the Provo phone directory and gave him a call. June answered, and after I explained our dilemma, she put her husband on the line. He graciously invited me and the 14 other Smith scholars to an Oaks family home evening in about 10 days. Not all 15 showed up, but about a dozen of us went into the presidential mansion and pretty much filled up the living room. The Oaks family was spectacular. They were musical. Sharma was our age, also a 1971 freshman, and in the honors program. Some of us had already met her. Sherry was a senior in high school, but taller than her older sister. Lloyd was old enough that we enjoyed talking with him. The younger two, Dallin D. and Truann, were quite cute, but we did not talk with them all that much. We all introduced ourselves and then began asking questions. Dallin Oaks, it turns out, is a terrific storyteller, especially with his sweetheart in the room laughing at his humor. After about an hour and a half of brilliant conversation, the famous BYU brownies came out and the evening wound down. As we filed out the door into the night air, we remarked, this was probably much more enjoyable than a visit to church headquarters would have been. A lot of our conversations centered around career choice, preparation, graduate school, and work-life balance. President Oaks was very persuasive. 6 of the 15 Smith scholars became attorneys, and 2 of them, John Mangum and Ted Meikle, earned their JD degrees from the University of Chicago. Tim Stratford went on to Harvard and spent most of his career in China. Kent Kamak, Matt Hilton, and Richard Wilkins all earned their JD degrees from the J. Reuben Clark Law School at BYU. Paul Cox went to Harvard and became a world-renowned ethnobotanist. Garrett Gong followed Clayton Christensen as a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford. They went on to become a diplomat. While Dallin Oaks was serving in the first presidency, Garrett was ordained an apostle. Bruce Jackson became a chemist, Bob Richards a chemical engineer. Bruce Webster became a computer engineer, and I went into business. Other future apostles on campus in our era were Neil L. Anderson, David A. Bednar, and Jeffrey R. Holland. Anderson was a freshman in 1969, served a mission in France, then returned and graduated in 1975, at which time he left to study at Harvard. Bednar was a freshman in 1970, served a mission in Germany, then returned and graduated in 1977, at which time he left to study at Purdue. Holland served his mission in England, earned his PhD from Yale in 1973, and joined the BYU religion faculty in 1974. About a week after our splendid home evening with the Oaks family, I got a phone call from a BYU administrator. He gave me a gentle but firm dress down. How dare I just call up the president of the university and invite myself and a bunch of my friends to the mansion? Didn't I know there were protocols for things like this? No, I did not. President Oaks had not seemed the least bit annoyed. I asked the administrator to arrange some kind of a general authority visit for us, which he agreed to do. In the spring of 1972, we Smith scholars had the pleasure of a private meeting with Elder Gordon B. Hinckley of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He drove to Provo in his own car, a Rambler Ambassador, purchased in honor of George Romney, former CEO of American Motors and former governor of Michigan, then serving as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, in the Nixon administration. Paul Cox, Garrett Gong, and I walked with the apostle back to his car after our visit. Elder Hinckley was impressive, very businesslike. But Dallin Oaks had a magnetic personality, was off the charts brilliant, and still fun to be around. For most of the 1971 Joseph Fielding Smith scholars, the evening we spent in the Oaks home was one of the highlights of our freshman year. And now for the bonus. My future wife, Shannon Savage, was also an entering BYU freshman in the fall of 1971. Over the summer, she visited the White House and danced with Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon. Every year, each state selects 2 high school seniors, one young man and one young woman, to represent their state in the U.S. Presidential Scholars Program in Washington, D.C. In 1971, the 2 from Utah were Shannon Savage from American Fork and John Mangum from Salt Lake City. Shannon attended BYU Late Summer Honors, where she became friends with several of the Joseph Fielding Smith scholars. These are her words. In August 1971, several freshmen came to BYU for late summer honors classes for 3 weeks before the semester started. We loved the teachers, the classes, and each other. But we studied a lot too. The second Saturday morning, a group of us went to the library to do our homework. However, unlike the previous Saturday, this time it was closed tight. Hoping that we were just a bit early, we waited until the next hour struck. Still, there was no one to let us into the normal study room. I said, there has got to be someone in the administration building who can help us. I'll just go there and see who I can find. I walked into the lobby and wondered where to go when a man came hurrying in the front doors and headed quickly up the stairs. I called to him, "Is there anyone around here with enough authority to let us into the library?" He stopped on the stairs and turned to me. "Perhaps I can help. Please come with me." I followed him up the stairs to his office and saw the new nameplate beside his door, Dallin H. Oaks, University President. I was flabbergasted. He was the new president of BYU with lots of authority, yet he took time to visit with me, a new freshman, and make some calls to find out that the library really was closed for a reason that particular Saturday. I think he walked me back down the stairs, too. I was impressed with this kind gentleman and appreciated my time at BYU even more because of him. And I had a difficult time not calling him President Oaks when he was an apostle, so I was really happy when he was called into the first presidency. Thank you, sweetheart, for that touching reminiscence. How do Shannon and I and millions of others know that Dallin H. Oaks will be a spectacular president of the church? Like the Savior, Jesus Christ. He makes time in his life for ordinary people, and he ministers to the one.